A quiet Michigan home became the scene of an unimaginable tragedy. 8 members of one family were found dead after a fire brought emergency crews to the house. And investigators now say the deaths were a murder-suicide, leaving a community struggling to understand what happened. A fire reveals a much darker scene. The first sign that something was terribly wrong was not a 911 call about a shooting. It was smoke. Emergency crews were sent to a home in Grand Haven Township after smoke was reported coming from the residence. At first, the scene looked like a house fire. Firefighters arrived and began working to get inside and search the property. But once they entered the home, the situation became far more disturbing. Investigators discovered 8 people dead inside, 2 adults and 6 children. The discovery immediately turned what had looked like a fire investigation into a major homicide investigation. Authorities later identified the adults as 47-year-old Christopher Karowitz and 39-year-old Amanda Karowitz. The 6 children ranged in age from 5 to 15. 4 were biological children of the couple, while 2 had been adopted. Authorities did not publicly release the children's names at that point. Investigators still had major questions. What had happened inside the house? How did all 8 people die? And was the fire connected to their deaths? The answers would become clearer after investigators and medical examiners examined the scene. The investigation changes direction. The fire itself turned out to be only one part of the story. Authorities said some of the victims had gunshot wounds, although officials initially waited for autopsy results before giving a final determination on the causes of death. Investigators also found a handgun inside the residence. Then came another important discovery. Police said there appeared to be several separate locations inside the home where fires had been deliberately started. That suggested the fire may not have been an accident at all. Instead, investigators began working with the Michigan State Police arson team to determine how and when those fires were started. The timeline was also unclear. Authorities believe the violence may have begun the night before, with the fire occurring later in the morning, but they said they were still examining video and other evidence to reconstruct exactly what happened. This is where the case became especially difficult. The person investigators believed was responsible was also dead. There would be no trial where a jury could hear the evidence, no courtroom where prosecutors could question the suspect, and no opportunity for investigators to simply ask him what happened. They would have to piece the story together from physical evidence, digital records, witness accounts, autopsy results, and the scene itself. Eventually, the medical examiner's findings gave investigators their biggest answer: what the autopsies revealed. After postmortem examinations, authorities determined that all 8 deaths were caused by gunshot wounds. The manner of death was also classified differently for the adults and children. Amanda and the 6 children were ruled homicide victims. Christopher's death was ruled suicide. That meant investigators concluded the case was a murder-suicide involving the entire family. The fire, according to preliminary findings, appeared to have been intentionally started in multiple areas of the house after the shootings. But even with those conclusions, one major question remained unanswered. Why? Authorities had established what they believed happened, but they had not established a clear motive. And that question became even more painful because, from the outside, the family had appeared to be living an ordinary life. They had 6 children. They shared trips and family activities. They posted photographs and videos online. Amanda, in particular, appeared on social media as a mother deeply involved in her children's lives. That contrast made the tragedy even harder for people who knew the family to understand. A family that looked happy from the outside. Friends remembered Amanda as someone who cared deeply about her family. People who knew her described her as a loving wife, mother, friend, and member of the community. Her social media posts also showed family activities, vacations, and plans for the children. There were ordinary moments that now feel painfully different when viewed after the tragedy. Family trips, beach photographs, summer plans, everyday moments with the children. Nothing about those posts could reveal what investigators later discovered inside the home. And that is one of the hardest parts of cases like this. A family can look completely normal from the outside while serious problems are happening privately. In this case, however, there were reports suggesting that the marriage had experienced difficulties before the killings. Those details would become an important part of the investigation as authorities tried to understand what may have led to such a devastating outcome. What may have been happening behind closed doors. As investigators tried to understand the family's final days, attention turned to Christopher and Amanda's marriage. Reports cited by several news organizations pointed to posts that Amanda had made online in 2024. In those posts, she described serious problems in the relationship, including an alleged affair by her husband. She described the emotional impact of discovering the affair and explained how difficult it had been to rebuild her confidence afterward. She also wrote about marriage counseling and the lasting effect that the alleged betrayal had on her. These posts are important because they provide a glimpse into problems Amanda herself had described. But they still do not provide a complete explanation for what happened years later. That distinction matters. An unhappy marriage does not automatically explain a murder-suicide, and investigators had not publicly established that the alleged affair was the motive for the killings. There may have been other factors that the public simply did not know about. In fact, when the Ottawa County Sheriff was asked directly whether investigators had identified a trigger or motive, the answer was that the investigation was still underway. That meant there was a painful gap between what authorities knew and what people wanted to know. They knew 8 people had died. They knew the deaths were caused by gunshots. They knew Amanda and the 6 children had been killed and that Christopher's death was ruled a suicide. They believed the fire had been deliberately started in several locations. But they still did not have a complete explanation for why Christopher allegedly decided to kill his family. The man investigators say was responsible. Christopher's death also created an unusual problem for investigators. Normally, when police identify a suspected killer, the next step is prosecution. Detectives gather evidence, prosecutors build a case, and eventually the accused person has an opportunity to face those allegations in court. That cannot happen here, because Christopher was also found dead. There will be no criminal trial against him. The Ottawa County Sheriff acknowledged that investigators would never be able to prosecute the person they believe committed the killings. But officials also stressed that the investigation still mattered. They wanted answers for the victims' relatives. They wanted answers for people in the community. And they wanted answers for the emergency responders who entered the home expecting to fight a fire and instead discovered 8 dead family members. That is one reason investigators continued examining the evidence even after the manner of death had been determined. A murder-suicide may appear straightforward once the medical examiner issues a ruling, but investigators still have to establish the sequence of events and make sure the evidence supports the conclusion. They were reviewing video, examining the fire scene, studying the physical evidence, and trying to build a timeline of the family's final hours.